welcome to Scott Talks, and I'm Scott Slaughter, and I'm here with Dr. Michael Caparrelli. The name of your episode is I'm the only one who spent 100 hours with a New York serial killer, and you and Laura had a very fascinating conversation. You really explain things clearly, and the line between mental illness, even some of the demonic sort of ideology behind serial killers. The serial killer we're talking about specifically is the son of Sam, who was David Berkowitz. He was a famous killer who terrorized New York in the 70s. The interesting thing is I don't really remember the circumstances. I was probably in my young 10, 12 year. I remember, what was his name? The Mansons and that whole situation of that time period, because like Laura said in the interview, the adults in my world were now being shocked by the behavior and the discoveries of this type of predator that we had in society. And, the interesting thing about your conversation is I couldn't really get over the idea of how many, Berkowitz shot 7 or 8 people, I think, in the 70s. And that was a
13.
13. Okay. 13. I had that wrong. Still, that happens every day in America now. It's crazy how normalized that has become in our society. And one of my first questions was, how do you relate what you found out spending time with David Berkowitz and the young mass killers that are going out and doing these acts today? What is relatable between these generations of killers? I guess we'll just say, you brought a lot of recovery sort of ideas back in, conversion ideas, which I do want to talk about. But at this time, how do you relate these? How are they relatable?
I think the common denominator between a lot of serial killers and school shootings is this outsider mentality, which, by the way, David himself says this in one of his letters taunting the police, to use his exact phrase, "I am an outsider, programmed to kill, watching the world go by." So the idea of being an outsider, socially disconnected, which in the 1970s, David was an anomaly, especially in New York City, the most populated place in the country.
Right.
He was the anomaly. But nowadays, with social media becoming not a supplement to relationships, but becoming a substitute, which, by the way, social media is a wonderful supplement, but it's a horrible substitute if it's all you have, as far as community.
I'll have to agree with you on that.
Yeah, if it's all you have for community, you got a problem. I think we're seeing more David Berkowitzes because there's greater isolation in our culture. Now, we might be extrovert as a country. We're very extrovert America, probably one of the most extroverted countries in the world. But being extroverted and being in a relationship are not the same thing. Being with people and bonding with people are two different things. And David Berkowitz, he grew up in New York City, very populated, but he never really made that connection. His favorite movie in that time period, interestingly enough, the movie that inspired him to go out and buy a .44 caliber, was Taxi Driver. If you've seen Taxi Driver, wow. Robert De Niro, he plays Travis Bickle. He's living in New York. He's driving a taxi. He's with people every day, but he doesn't know how to relate. He's isolated. Well, David related to Travis Bickle. He saw himself as Travis Bickle. He actually even became a taxi driver for a little while in New York. Martin Scorsese, who made that film, just made a statement about a year ago in the middle of my writing the book, and I couldn't believe he made the statement. It was in the newspaper and it was all over the internet. And it was, for me, a confirmation from the heavens that I was on the right path. He said, when I put the movie out in the 70s, Travis Bickle was an anomaly. He said, but today, probably 1 out of 3 young men can relate to Travis Bickle. There are 1 out of 3 young men that are like Travis Bickle. And when he said that, I said, he just captured the essence of really what was behind the Son of Sam massacre and what's behind a lot of these school shootings. I mean, a lot of the senseless violence you see today, it's someone pay attention, someone notice me. This cry for attention, even if it means bad attention. We know from the data that isolation At University of Japan did a fascinating study. They took a group of rodents, they isolated a sample of rodents for a period of time, and after so many days of isolation, they returned the isolated rodents back to their community. And at the point of reentry, they attack the other rodents, the isolated
Wow.
rodents, because isolation, aggression goes up, cortisol goes up, we become more aggressive. And oxytocin, which is empathy, oxytocin
Yep.
goes down. So we become more aggressive, less empathetic. It's the reason why back in the day, if you went to a party and you brought a friend and they argued with everybody at the party, you would say, I'm sorry about my friend. He doesn't get out much. That's usually
Right.
the excuse you made because
Sure.
you lose
Sure.
social grace. You lose the ability to relate to people and you dominate rather than relate. And that was certainly David Berkowitz's story. And that's certainly the backdrop of many of your school shooters today.
That's so fascinating. I think that's the thing that's so attractive to this stuff is that it is difficult to draw a bridge between an empathetic human being and somebody who has taken such a drastic action in our society. Now, you've been a pastor for many years.
16.
Your PhD in human behavior is what is your study in your PhD, by the
Well,
way?
it's the School of Behavioral Science. The exact degree is the Advanced Studies of Human Behavior, PhD.
Okay, so and you've worked in communities as a pastor, so you've developed a tremendous empathetic capacity. And let me ask you this: what brought you into this idea that you wanted to find out more about what motivated these men? These now you've interviewed a couple of other serial killers, and Dave Berkowitz was you started it. You said in 2016 with the interviews,
No, David
but what?
Berkowitz began in 2021 with letter writing. And
Oh,
then we
okay,
met
letter writing in
officially
2021.
in early 2022.
Okay, but you have found that you have a specific capacity to maybe understand and prevent more of this, and that's what's driven you to write your book called Monster Mirror, which I'm going to get when we get off because I find this stuff really fun to read for me. I'm not sure why, but um, what brought you to that place, and do you really feel like at this point you're making an impact in helping people to understand how this type of thing goes down and how we can prevent it?
I think for me, it began at 11 years old. I was in the playground, and I remember a girl named Gina that I live with in this housing project. She approached me and she said, I'd be really scared to go home and live with your father. And I remember thinking to myself, my dad is fun. I don't know this person you speak of. I mean, he takes me for rides in the back of his truck. He tickles me until I cough blood. I'm just kidding. But I knew
I don't do
I
that.
knew a different side of my father than the people in the neighborhood. So I knew this human side, and I guess that there's been something in me from the time I was a young boy that is empathize with the worst possible offenders, those that society has written off as irredeemable.
Mm.
I went looking to meet not just the monster in David Berkowitz, but the man. I do hope the book is in the hands of, and I'm hearing a lot of stories. I mean, right now it's got quite a few reviews on Amazon. It's pretty strong ratings. The reviews are really good. People saying, I was in such a dark place psychologically. I felt so isolated. I felt so full of shame. I was so angry, and I read this book and it touched me. So I'm seeing it make a difference, and that's what I pray, that it continues to make an impact on those that are troubled.
Well, I think you convinced me when you talked about David's conversion in prison and his willingness to help other people, and you also mentioned how people who are in dark places and thinking about committing violent acts are reaching out for hope and asking how I don't know what they're asking, but they seem to be asking for something. And has that happened more than once in your with David? And have you been a part of that particular process?
Yeah, I mean, as I would visit him every other week, I would hear story after story. I mean, even the guy that killed four people on the college campus in, was it Utah? Maybe about 2 years ago, the college campus killer.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that
yeah.
guy wrote David Berkowitz a couple of letters. So people reach out to him.
Before the act or
One of
after?
them was it was before.
Okay.
David did not realize the seriousness of the letter. He thought, I mean, he receives letters all the time from, whack jobs, as well as people like
Sure.
looking for guidance, but some just crazy, just absolute deranged. So he didn't really know what to make of it. One was prior to the actual crimes on the college campus.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. Maybe you can give me real quick, what does a day for David Berkowitz look like in prison now in 2024?
Well, he sleeps on a mattress that, and I'm sure many are going to say he deserves it, and I get it, but the mattress is just horrendous. The springs, you know, cause such an annoyance that he's got sciatic pains all over his body. He's got arthritis.
Mm,
Wakes up about 5 o'clock, probably sleeps about 4 or 5 hours. Small TV in his cell, about 16 inches, 42 channels. Watches the Animal Channel. It's one of his favorite channels. He watches some other reality shows, and he's very geographic. Likes to see different parts of the world. I just went to Nome, Alaska, to do a mental health conference, and I sent him some pictures from Nome, Alaska, which really got him excited. Nome is like a remote village on the Barren Strait that's like not far from Russia. So he'll watch a little TV before he goes to bed. Wakes up at 5 o'clock, has coffee in his cell. He reads his Bible for the first hour, from 5 to 6. He's very involved in work in the prison, like he helps clean the chapel. He was a mobile assistant where he would help those in wheelchairs, push them to go get their medication. Then he spends hours all morning responding to letters and writing. He
mm.
writes devotions that's put on a website called the riseandshine.org. There are years and years of his journal entries on that website that are pretty inspiring.
Wow. And when you speak to him, do you sense that there's a person sitting there going, I can't believe what I did? Or is there a stronger connection to that person now?
No, he's still very much traumatized by his own crimes. Anytime he talks about it, a vein, protrudes out of his head like he's deadlifting 400 pounds, and he cries. I saw David's, not just his actions, but I saw his reactions. And reactions are a better litmus test of character than actions. People can put on an act. Shakespeare said the world is a stage and we're all thespians. Reactions are visceral. It's how a man behaves when he's caught off guard, and the reactions are really what convinced me he's the real deal.
Your ability to be empathetic and understanding and still, step into these wild situations is astounding. I have to ask you, are there other killers, serial killers that you're curious about? Are there people that you like to meet, or you kind of, learned enough from David's situation that the work is taking a priority for you?
I enjoyed the journey so much. I mean, I had some painful moments, but I would love to do it again. There is one particular person, I won't say his name just yet, but he's pretty well known, who's reading the book Monster Mirror. And it might happen again. To see the grace of God in gritty places, amazing grace, to see it shine in very gritty, dark areas, for me,
Yeah,
is very,
I bet.
very fulfilling.
I bet if it does give you a sense of hope and faith that probably not many of us get to experience. And your perception, your story, your experience is 100% believable. If you guys want to hear the full interview, which is extremely fascinating, and for millennials who don't maybe know who Son of Sam is, he sort of was one of the OGs, I would say, in this publicly, for us coming to understand this type of person that lives in our world. And Lauren, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your journey with us. Again, all the information for Dr. Mike Caparrelli, or Michael Caparrelli, is in our show notes. We'll have a link to your book as well. And we'll stay in touch with you and keep an eye on things. Michael, thank you.
Thank you so much.